Welcome to Legend Makers, the podcast where education's true heroes take center stage.
Shine like a ray from the sun. There's something people look for but never can find.
All right. Welcome to the Legend Makers podcast. I have sitting in front of me today virtually, Elizabeth Allen. Elizabeth Allen, you're Endeavor Science Teaching Project graduate. Nice to see you today. Really good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah, it's been a few years, but it's really good to see you. And it's awesome to see how much your company has grown. So keep it up.
you.
I'm so excited you've added the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, we're looking forward. I'm personally having a great time doing this. So I'm going to read your bio like I do most. You are a STEM advocate and educator committed to fostering STEM education and innovation. So I know that. You're also a curriculum developer. You write creative, engaging, and effective STEM curricula. So that's what you do. A while back, you founded a school. You successfully established an inner city STEM project-based learning school. Love to hear more about that. And some of your industry recognitions through Intel, Dell, and the Museum of Science for contributions to STEM education. We connected because you have a passion for drones, and you've also linked that into a sustainability model. This is interesting. You aspire to develop youth-based drone tree planting initiatives. Aha. And you're actively involved in sustainable agriculture and environmental initiatives. And you've got this favorite spicy STEM podcast, which is Cosmos with Cosmos. I'll have to check that out. Welcome. This is great. Welcome to the podcast. Let's get into it.
Thanks.
So tell me what you've been doing. I mean, we haven't connected in a couple of years. You know the rundown here. We're going to go through kind of the three questions, but I just want to tell everybody, introduce yourself and tell everybody, not from your bio, who you are and what you're up to.
Sure. So again, my name is Elizabeth Allen. I absolutely endorse STEM and as a general group of topics. I love when people put art and reading, especially reading, in with STEM to make it stream or STEAM. But I feel like what you learn in sciences is that after about 10 years, your knowledge that you worked so hard to get, it has such a continual learning cycle. So I think that if you're involved in helping the next generation, making sure that every year you're continually improving yourself is part of that process. So be a lifelong learner. The items that your students are going to learn and go forward with are different than things that you've learned along your path. So I think that drones is one example of how you can turn something that was once used in one purpose for something else. And I think that, building on that is really important.
And tell me about your background. Like, where did you're in Phoenix, Arizona now. Where did you grow up? What did you do? What was your background like?
So I grew up in Phoenix, and it's really cool. It's kind of weird, the cyclical. If you leave Phoenix, there's like a statistic about 80% of us come back. And I don't know if it's just the sunshine aspect of it, or it's the fifth largest growing city in the US. So there's a lot. I've moved a few times to California twice for work, and to Korea for 3 years for work, and China once for work. And I've had some amazing offers, and I keep coming back here. A lot of it is kind of like, I like when people can help bring stuff to the next generation. It's really important for me to be able to do that. I wish we'd had more science. I wish we'd had drones when I was a kid. And my attitude this past year, because I was asked to help some of the other fellow teachers with Science Matters in America, was just, doing observations and being really positive about it, understanding it's a learning curve, and just being very patient and observing before kind of giving direct feedback. Because I think a lot of times there's an intimidation factor when it comes to education, and that doesn't necessarily have to be there. Listening to your students is kind of number one, but it's something, because we're so limited on time in a formal classroom environment, we don't always get a chance to do just that. So it's kind of fun to be able to bring that voice.
That's right. So you like you prefer like those STEM electives, you have a little more time to open up, and an hour to an hour and a half is great. I know we wrestle with that too in our curriculum. It's like people sometimes have literally 40 minutes, and we know that's not really 40 minutes. We know that's more like 30 by the time you get them in, get them out. Well, that's hard to do anything really meaningful in like a STEM environment, like hands-on, physical. So we try to push and advocate for longer sessions, not larger. And so why did you get into this? Tell me, how did you get into education? What prompted it?
This is a fun story because it was definitely like a family of educators at one point. So my sister, my older sister, she had been a social worker. We're like 18 months apart for 5 years, and she worked really intensively with kids that had close to terminal diseases. And I think for her, it was just really like heart centering difficult after 5 years, even though she's very good at it. And she still very much has that like two heart social worker drive ethos in her work and in her life. She has her own business now as well. But she went to South Korea. And so she's teaching there. And my dad had just retired. He and she were teaching at the same school. And suddenly they're like, well, why don't you come and teach here? I had finished a project out of San Diego. It was 2008. And here the economy was kind of in a downturn. And
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, why not? I have my family, half of my family's already out there. And then my younger brother came and started teaching with me. So
In
suddenly,
Korea.
yeah.
So
So
wait.
suddenly,
So let me catch this. So
yeah.
you went, so your sister, by the way, you said something I want to come back to, this two heart thing, I think is, well, I want to come back to that because I've never heard that before, but it makes complete sense in the context in which you said it. But so your sister gets out of that space, but then goes to Korea to teach. So
Yes.
sure, there's a whole story there as well. And then you kind of, I don't want to use the, I guess, follow her out there, or she says, come out. And you're like, yeah, sure. That sounds like an interesting thing. And then right there, your brother goes as well.
And yeah, right afterwards. So it was really weird. So my older sister brought her 5-year-old that turned 6 and had kindergarten with her at her school. And my dad went with to kind of help with childcare. And then my younger brother, he came with and worked at my school. So
How was,
they're
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
it's fine. It's just that like now I'm so proud of my little brother. He's finally like starting to get back to wanting to be an educator. He's been doing like programming and stuff, and he lives in Doha. So he and his wife are in Doha, but like the expat life is kind of its own thing, and like teaching
Mm.
internationally is such a gift. I highly recommend it. Anytime you get an opportunity, like it's the different and how teachers are respected in different cultures. I mean, even from East Coast to West Coast, I mean, even California, man, it's different everywhere. So like the more
Oh.
experience you have, if you have a chance to travel, go for it. But yeah, so anyways, everybody else in my family stayed a year. I stayed for 3 years, and I was
So
like, this
you
is
went to
cool.
Korea, and what were
Yeah.
you teaching? What grades? Like, what was it like? So tell me, I'm super intrigued by this. So I'm not just going to let you off the hook. I want to hear the story. So you
Okay.
go out to Korea to meet your sister, and she's
Yes.
teaching at what kind of a school? Paint me a picture.
Sure. She was teaching at a Jesuit language immersion school. They're called Hagwons. And it
Hagwons.
has a very good reputation. It was SLP. So my dad had gone to like University of Scranton at one point, and a lot of Catholic school in his family. So for them, him having his first year retired, and this is kind of like, oh, okay, this is going to be my fun job. And it really was for him, but he was grandpa teacher. And so all
Huh.
these little kindergartners, and he had second shifts because the Korean system over there for language schools is kind of like going to another school after your regular school to learn English. So
Hmm.
the Hagwon model is a little bit weird, but it's very much like it's like a push school. And so my first year, I didn't know I wasn't supposed to teach 12 classes a day. Like there's all these things that you learn later. You're like, oh wow, I was a trial by fire, but I got through it. And then my second year and my third year, I was in a smaller town called Gwangju that was like in the southern part of the country. And that I got to teach science and I got to teach math, and the kids are so good. Like to this day, that was those 2 years of second and third graders are seriously some of the best students. They're really smart kids. They had to know three
Really smart
languages,
kids.
3 instruments, like,
Wow.
and that was their regular studies. And it was a Seventh Day Adventist school. So those folks at Samyuk go, hey, hi kids, like you're adults now, like you're in college, and keep going
Wow.
because they're so bright. But it's a lot of fun, but it's also very much like it makes you just thankful for the opportunities that you've had. Like, that your experience was kind of a little bit different. And sometimes even like being extra patient with like that whole process, because I studied environmental science initially, going back to school, making sure I had a teaching credential. Like, if you come into this space with life experience, that's awesome. and it's like definitely valued, but you have to make sure that you learn those finer tuned skills about classroom management, those things that like regular teachers would have had to have learned in a regular traditional environment if they'd gone just for that.
Right, right. And you kind of, so did you have a teaching background before you went out there? Were you already
No.
teaching? So you basically just were kind of thrown into this.
Yes. Well,
You
I
chose to
taught,
you threw yourself into it.
yes, I taught yoga. And
Okay.
so
That's
from
teaching
yoga
that's
to
teaching.
this,
Okay.
yeah, the owner of the first school that I was at had a yoga studio as well. Oh, I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you for sure. Yep.
But yeah, it's cool, but it was definitely a little different. But the idea of like teaching doesn't have to be as stressful as a lot of times it becomes. Um, it's just you have to be very patient, and you have to make sure that the needs of your students, number one, that they feel cared for, and that they're going to learn more if they're happy and they're having fun. It's just learner engagement.
So what aside from your sister going out and you deciding like this sounds cool, like what this gets to my why question, right? Like why? Like why did that appeal to you? What about teaching pulled you into Korea, right? Like that's your first, was that like your first taste of teaching?
Like formal education, yeah, that was
Formal
my first.
education.
Yeah, that was my first experience with formal education. I would say that even the Hagwon models are kind of more informal. I mean, it was because of smaller class sizes, they're
Yeah.
allowed to get kids ahead faster. Like I had no idea you couldn't teach kindergartners how to read Harry Potter, and I did. Like there's all these like little things where like,
What do you mean by that? Like you weren't
yeah,
allowed. It was
well,
prohibited?
it's not prohibitive, but the idea of like, I feel like sometimes in a traditional teaching model you are given a strict curriculum that you're
Mhm.
adhering 30 kids to getting to a certain point in a certain period of time, when if you make your group smaller, you make it fun, you can move them faster, and they don't realize they're learning. Like as soon as they're
Mhm.
having fun, you've passed that threshold where it's
See,
learning or engagement, and it's like, oh, this is okay. We found jazz. Like before, it was just random instruments, but we found some jazz. This is
oh,
good.
cool. So you
Yeah.
taught them to read Harry Potter
In kindergarten, yeah,
in
and I didn't know that
kindergarten.
in their second language, which was like, and again, when you don't know what you're like, you don't know what the pacing is supposed to be. Like I took them out of the regular classroom environment to practice their English, because the way that like they actually like went to practice in the doctor's office and like practice how to speak and learn their science through the medical science thing first, like because I didn't know that you couldn't. And so I would go home every day and I would nerd out with my family and be like, how do you do this better, how do you do this better, and then you just keep going from there. So yeah, it's a lot of
Wow.
fun.
What a great experience. And you were there for how long?
I was there for 3 years, but I also
Three
had like,
years.
yeah, I also felt really lucky in that the Seventh Day Adventist model of the schools was very much like, so they didn't let their kids have sugar, which I know is like really difficult, but it was all vegetarian, and so like the kids themselves were just kind of geared with like super healthy food,
Uh,
super positive people, and then they have definitely like, all right, cool, let's, if you wanted to try something new. I think that's the first time I ever saw one of my co-teachers from Canada teach special effects. Like how many kids in like fourth grade get to learn special effects? And this is like 2010. Like
yeah,
this
it's
is
very
like,
different now, right?
yeah. So like suddenly there's like green screening like back then, and it was
Cool.
like you just kind of run with it. So I guess part of it is just not being afraid to try new things. I like that for you, you kind of went into, I am embracing where I'm at and I'm going to run with this because it's fun. And I think
Yeah.
that that's very much an ethos that will keep everybody going.
Yes. And that's why you got into it. So when we think about your why, you decided this would be fun, something that you thought it would be. I mean, do you have like a broad purpose of like, I really want to make sure I want to change the lives of students? Is your why real deep? Or when the beginning, did it just seem fun?
It had to be both
Uh-huh.
because it's incredibly competitive in South Korea.
It
And this
is.
is before smartphones. So it's not like you had like a translator app to help you. Like, I mean, you just gotta go with it. Like, I mean, if you were learning, and then I think the weird part was when Samsung came out with their phones, it was, it hit the market there first. So it was like by the last year, 2012, it was like even Seoul, everybody's like on their phones. Like they're having accidents walking around downtown Seoul because
Right,
everybody's
right.
on their phone. Like it became like a cultural shift. Every
Huh.
place was just, connected.
Wow. Wow. And did you speak the language when you went out there or no?
Not very well. Like I
And so how
tried.
was that adjustment?
It was very, I took lessons in 2010 and in a place called Masan, and I had a really good teacher to kind of help with that. But I feel bad, but like it's a level 4 language. Like I don't know if you know like language difficulties. So like for I think the Defense Department has given like categories for if you're a language speaker of English first, this one is the easiest to learn. This is a level 2 language, so these guys are kind of easy. This one's level 3 language, it's a little more difficult. This is level 4 language, it's really hard. So if you're
Hmm.
an English speaker, Korean's a level 4 language, like it's hard.
That
But
is,
some
I'm
people
sure
are
it
really
is.
good at it.
Wow. And now can you speak it?
No.
No.
like
Oh, okay. All right.
like I
But you
can I
taught.
can see a little like and I can understand like when
Okay.
other people are speaking English, but people are like, oh, now that K-pop has suddenly become like a thing, and you're just like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, K-pop.
Oh yeah.
like
All
like
right.
I can tell what you're saying, but can I
Okay.
say it correctly and grammatically? Not really. I can order food. That's pretty much
Yeah.
it.
All
But
right. Well, that's a good thing being able to order food. Oh, that's amazing. What a cool experience. So you've then now let's talk about like advice. Then I think you've already given a lot. I mean, you talk about like going for it and being persevering and finding your desire to do it. But tell me, like, if I were starting out, like when you went, because I got to tell you, that seems like it takes an extraordinary amount of courage, a little bit of guts. I get fun, but also like being just put out into a place where you don't know the language, you don't know the people, and now you're actually going to be teaching. I can imagine there might have been a lot of anxiety or like stress or maybe like uncertainty. Like when, if now just bring it back home, right? Let's come back home. And I'm a teacher or I'm a student, let's just say, or I'm somebody thinking about, I think I've got a son who's in college now and maybe he's thinking about what he wants to do. And he says, maybe I want to go teach. He's got a really cool marketing professor right now. I know he looks up to this guy, and maybe that says, I think that's kind of cool. Maybe I want to be a teacher. And oops. And what would you tell somebody on the fence or just getting into it? What advice would you give them? Whoops, we lost your
you
there
get
you
it?
go. Yeah, you're
Okay,
good.
cool. Alrighty,
All
I'll just
right.
hold it. It's not that stable, but that's okay. Starting with your son, I think that just you can recognize that whatever flame that marketing professor kind of, fanned caught on, that caught something in him that got him excited about wanting to learn more in that topic. And I think just kind of recognizing that in your students and recognizing that in yourself is kind of a big part of it. I would also give the advice of ask. Don't be afraid to ask. I to this day, if I see somebody who's an excellent educator, I don't care if they're brand new out of the gate, they're their first year, and I've had a couple of really good ones actually this past year. But ask if you can observe their class.
Yeah, we heard that that
Nerd
several
out.
times.
Yeah, nerd out. Like find someone to review your class that you admire, that that's been in the field a little bit longer, just so that
Hmm.
you can understand those like things that make them want to keep their students engaged in learning, because I feel like the kids are more stressed than they were, and I think that technology was supposed to help with that, but I think it did the opposite for some kids. And
Stresses them out.
yeah, so it's
Well,
you
there's a
got
lot of information. They're on social. I can't even imagine being a young girl in this environment today. They're just so I think there's just this unrealistic cherry picked lifestyle that these kids have to see that we never did growing up. I mean, I didn't know you lived in your neighborhood, you went to where you went. I went to boarding school, so I got to meet lots of different kinds of people, but we lived together. It wasn't watching everybody's life through the phone. And I got to see everybody's, warts and problems as well as my own because we cohabitated. But seeing everybody's cherry picked life through a phone. I can only imagine the anxiety as an adolescent. I mean, male or female. I think females might have it a little harder because of just some of the expectations of beauty or whatever that might be. But I think across the board, it's hard. So you've had to deal with that. So as coming in, as a teacher or somebody thinking about teaching, I'm on the fence. And what do you have any resources? I know. So we've heard this. I love these commonalities. This is one of the reasons we do this. Um, you said, go observe, ask. That's like I hear that in every one of these discussions I have with people. Go and ask somebody. Go observe something. Do you have some people come with like a lot of cool resources? Others, don't. But are there any things you can think about? Like, hey, I like to go here, or I was listening to this, or I read this book that I thought was very transformative for me. Anything that you could share with people that could help them along?
Sure, I definitely will. And for the younger grades, when it comes to classroom management stuff, I feel like that's kind of like the unspoken 500-pound gorilla is classroom management. And everybody has different things and different strategies. I like the book 1, 2, 3 Magic for lower grades. I would say like pre-K through 4, fifth graders in middle school. They've kind of been established enough in terms of being able to follow classroom protocols. But it's just like baseball. It's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out. So it goes really fast. You just have to be really simple with it. Like 1 is a warning, 2 is a 60-second timeout, and 3, well, you gotta sit down and write something up because they're doing the same thing. Like,
So the book's called 1, 2, 3 Magic.
yes.
All right, we'll look it up. We'll link it in the show notes. I always put the
Thank
links
you.
in so people can go get that book if they so desire. Anything else? Like any other places, resources?
Yeah, I will totally like I'll champion some of the amazing professional development folks that I've met along the way. We had it for STEM and STEAM in project-based learning. I love the high tech high training that my the founding school kind of went through. Unfortunately, that school is no longer around, but we had some pretty good training in San Diego. So if anybody
Uh-huh.
gets options for that particular school and going through a program, I like how they use everything. They really enhance the kids' creativity. But that's also a place that has a ton of resources. So you kind of have to kind of like think of it like it depends on the kids and
Mhm.
not you never want to come in with being like, all right, you're in a district that doesn't necessarily have the resources as the Gates Foundation that donated to High Tech High, but you have to still be inspired somewhere and still have like consistent training somewhere. And I think a big part of it is just finding what's interesting to your students and how to get them to connect.
So finding what's interesting with your students. So if I'm thinking about being an educator, the challenge is, hey, go observe, make sure this is something you really want to do. Your why's got to be pretty significant. You've got to have that desire to go make a difference. You know why I founded Drone Legends. Inside every child lives a legend, because I do believe that. And I think that resonates with a lot of other educators that I've spoken with. And then there are lots of different resources. One, classroom management's got to be a key, right? I mean, if you can't manage the class, that's an impediment to moving forward in getting the good work done, right? And some classes are going to be more challenging than others. I always like to use me as the example of the kid you didn't want in your class. Um, trust me, trust me, trust me. It was not a good picture. So okay, so I've got a few things going on. Tell me about this school that you founded. Talk to me about that. So I know you said it was a while ago, but what did you do?
Sure. So I was one of 4 founding teachers, and then we had 2 head of schools. These ladies had met in grad school, and they decided with a $600,000 grant from the Walton Foundation to turn a homeless shelter into a school.
Where
And
was this?
this is in Central Phoenix. This is like right on McDowell, right downtown, across from a couple of major hospitals. Like
Okay.
it's literally like, if you pass it, it looked like any other building, but they were inspired. They wanted to bring to Central Phoenix and to a Title I community some resources. They brought in Google. They told the families that they were going to have laptops in 2013 for the kids. There were Chromebooks, but
Yeah.
at first, I mean, there was a huge learning curve. And again, these these ladies had the best of intentions, and that's what you have to kind of come back to, is that people that want to break the mold, they start out with really good intentions.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really challenging, but you have to understand that going in. So I feel like not everybody has the opportunity to do things like that. And I reconnected with one of the other founding teachers who's now an administrator for a different district. And she's like, yeah, I went over to the dark side. Like, I'm an admin
So
now,
is the
but
school still there?
the building is still there. They got bought
But the
out by a different
school,
charter.
they
Yeah,
did. Okay.
it did not last a couple of years. They tried
Hmm.
really hard, but unfortunately, it just there were some things that they did initially plan to be a 6 through 12, and it was
Mm-hmm.
supposed to add on one grade level each year. But yeah, I think it just there was a couple of things that were real, and we had a lot of turnover with the other teachers. So
What was
but
something you learned from that experience? Like what was one of the key things that you learned out of that experience?
always get there early. That sounds really weird. That sounds really weird, but like, um, you have a really good mantra of being a wake with the sun. Like when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
educators, like you really do. Like you have to wake with the sun. You have to get there first. Like it's one of those things that, even if it's a hard day, talk to your peers, have a powwow, get your paperwork done. That sounds really like it's a big deal. Make sure your IEPs are up to date, so your individualized learning plans, before you open the door. Like there's all of these things that like consistently you kind of have to be on top of. And make sure the reading levels are up there, which is why I love the fact that you have a book. And I really I that's the biggest thing is
Have
like
you read it? Did you
I brought it with, well, I didn't finish it yet. I'm sorry, I didn't finish it yet. I
did you
brought it
but you
with
actually
me.
have a copy?
Oh yeah, I definitely do. I brought it with me
Get
all
out.
last week. Yeah, to Minecraft camp. We were
Oh,
doing
sweet.
Minecraft modding on Engineering for Kids, and one of the little girls who, she looks like somebody that's on the cover, and I'm like,
Yeah.
look, there's you. And I don't want to say
Awesome.
her name, but she got inspired, and then the next day she brought a book about wolves, like, and so like
Oh,
on her
nice.
downtime,
I
yeah.
love
So
oh, it's so
yeah,
nice
so
to hear.
you yeah, but you really like when it came down to it, the kids at the school, their reading level was a few years behind. And so
Mhm.
we focused and had to shift from as much STEM stuff as we wanted to do to adding more reading minutes. And I feel like
Mm.
that has been the thing we've had to add the most, at most programs that I've been a part of. And when I worked with City of Phoenix and fairly recently, I just focused on helping them with their reading program. And that's all we did. That just, brought in tutors. Experience Core is awesome. Please add Experience Core if you can. It's across the
What's
nation.
Experience Core?
Yeah.
What is it? Experience Core?
Experience Corps is AARP. They bring in retirees that want to volunteer, and they sit
Ah,
and they read, and it's great. And it's twice a week, and it's free.
it's
So
free.
your
So wait,
school
let's
can do
not
this.
I want to because I want to link to, so I want people to see this. So it's called Experience Core
Yes,
and it's the through the AARP.
correct.
And so people come and read.
Yeah, that's it.
Awesome.
I mean, they have to do like background checks to make sure
Of
that they're
course.
safe to go on the campuses, and they do
Yeah.
some training. But it's quite a big gift to not just
That's
bring
awesome.
in someone to sit and read with little guys so that they meet their third grade reading level requirements.
That's
And
cool.
the city did a really good job, even underutilized. I feel they were, but they made use of the time that they had, and it was really cool to see that program did make a difference. But
Oh.
you don't have to be an expert to be an inspiring person in a child's life. That's the big message. Like,
Say that again. You
you
don't have to
don't
be an
have to be
expert.
an expert to be an inspiring person in a child's life. Sometimes it's just putting down the devices and sitting down with a book and just making sure that they feel cared for and they're getting that one-on-one. It's a huge mentoring thing, so it's kind of cool.
Hmm. I like it. I think I couldn't agree with you more. Um, let's go here. Last question. Be mindful of your time. So, okay, world can be quite polarizing. We've got an election in just weeks. And it's, as you know, it's just a disaster. It's like, come on. I can't even believe we're I can't even believe we're all having these conversations. I look at the polarization, and it just keeps going. And I know that we all live in the middle of the bell curve. I know we do. There's just fringes at the end. And I feel that most people they want to love and communicate and be with each other. And I know we're social creatures, and this is just, so I am an optimist. All right.
Cool.
So
Yeah.
and I try to find other optimists in the world, and I try to inspire optimism in other people, because there's always something we can learn. Like, for example, with your school, yeah, 2 years, but I'm sure in that process, a lot of good things happened. You learned a lot of great things. You probably impacted so many people that wasn't just because the school is no longer there and it was 2 years. I'm sure there was a ton of good things. The silver linings were all there, I'm sure. So in the education space, as it relates to education or the education community or teaching or any of this stuff, what are you optimistic about? What excites you?
I really think that drones, honestly, there's a company called Dendra Systems. You probably know it. It's out of the UK.
Yeah.
They plant trees with drones. And I know you can do so much. You can do so much, and you don't have to be an expert. The drones they use are pretty huge, but
Yeah.
that's one of those like short-term solutions. I think you can do a lot with cleaning the ocean and recycling
Mhm.
plastics. There's a company out of Scotland that has something called EcoScene. They're using plastics to make rocket fuel. Like, and so I joke about this, but I am completely serious. Like, what better motivation than finding alternative fuels within the resources that otherwise are clogging the ocean? Like, I mean, seriously, like
Amazing,
that's what I'm
right?
optimistic about. Yeah, like they have like these amazing people in the world coming up with solutions that are just like out of the box cool. Now I know that for Arizona, I had a chance to plant a tree on a campus. I'm like, you don't seem to understand how long that took. But so for the Arizona Sustainability Alliance, this is what their nonprofit has been doing for a couple of years now. And they're bringing in some amazing things to classrooms, like this is a vertical garden. You guys can
Yeah.
learn to grow your
Yeah.
own food in your classroom. Like it doesn't have to be what it was. We can change what we thought the system was. And it doesn't, I think that is the biggest message is like, there's more solutions out there that people will keep coming up with, and it's just going forward with them, not being afraid to make mistakes along the way. Like, and even if you make a mistake, be honest about it and acknowledge it and then change it. Like that's part of science, is like it's science because it does change. Like you had to have 10,000 light bulbs break before you got the first one working. Like, but when it comes to kids, they should really see a finished prototype.
Yeah. I'm listening to a James Dyson bio, and he was amazing. He started his own university because they just couldn't get engineers that were capable of doing what they wanted. He was everything's we're supposed to build, right? Like his whole premise was we are supposed to create. We're not supposed to sit in stools and look at computers, and we are meant to use our hands. There's a reason we have two hands and a brain, is what he says. And you just reminded me of that as I'm reading. His whole thing was students got paid. Imagine this. Students, when they went to the Dyson University, they were literally working alongside brilliant engineers. And not only did they not have to pay to go, they made money while they were paid for the time to be there. I think that's amazing. And I think you're right. And I listened to another podcast, and the other guy was talking about business just being about solving problems, right? Like for every problem, there's a business that's trying to solve it. And so I think of like this eco scene, which we're going to check out. I guess that's a play on like kerosene, like eco scene, right?
Yeah.
Right. So I'll look that up and we'll take a look at them. But there's all these challenges, and we have the technology today to kind of address them, to start addressing them. And I think getting kids excited, I'm with you, right? Like the whole reason, the way we structure our programs are problem-based learning. We put kids in situations that they have to figure things out. They have to use the resources or the technology or things at their disposal or create new to address a problem, right? So we work backwards from the problem. And I think there's a lot I'm excited because I see more of it as I go out into the educational conferences and trade shows, and I see what other people are doing. You're right. I saw the vertical hydroponic garden curriculum, and I was like, oh, cool. And they're growing their own food, right? And it was like, this is awesome. This is how kids learn. Um, yeah, so that I'm like you. I share that optimism in that we are in a really neat place where education is due for a little bit of a disruption, right? Like we came out of the industrial revolution, and that model seems to be what we've held on to still. A lot of the standardized testing and being able to create good compliant workers, right? Versus critical thinkers. And we're going to need much more critical thinking moving forward, and innovators and explorers and risk takers and people that are kind of pushing the boundaries and giving kids early on opportunities to experience what it's like to build, create, solve problems, because it can be very fun, right? I mean, it's a lot of fun planting trees, like you said, right? And I know this Dendra Solutions. I've seen them, right? It's very cool. They're shooting like they can plant pods and pods and pods of seeds, and they can basically reforest like that using drone
Yeah.
technology. Cool.
Yeah. And I think I honestly think that like you just upgraded to what, the DJI voice controlled. I saw that video. That
I've
looks
got this
so
little guy
cool.
here. It's really
That's
kind of
so
cool. It's
cool.
the video. It's neat. I'll be honest. There's some things about it that are really neat. Like you don't even need a controller. All these little features up here can even be activated by pressing this button. And there's like different modes that are like 360, a boomerang, a rocket, they call it, a droney, a follow, directional. So follow will come behind you. Directional will be, even if you walk in front of it, it'll fly backwards. And you can actually then voice prompt it instead of using that little button. You don't even need a controller. You can just say directional, and it'll say three. Well, you say, hey, fly. Like, hey, Siri, hey, fly, right? You say, hey,
Yes.
fly, and then it'll say, what would you like to do? And you say, follow me. 3, 2,
Nice.
1, boom, and it takes off and it follows you. I've yet to do it walking the dogs. I tried. I was in a no-fly zone. I guess there was a presidential thing the other day. Day I got it. Second day I got it. It worked fine yesterday, and then it wouldn't take off. And I look at the map and I'm like, oh, there's like some big presidential thing going on. They shut the whole area down. But I will
Yeah,
get a
but
dog walking video soon.
that is really cool. I see. I think my dog would try to eat that. Like,
My dog did try to eat it. There's settings where you can set it a little higher. My one dog, Ruby, she's long and lean and she loves it. She can't let go of it. And she did get it, but it's a really durable little build. Look at this thing. It's
yeah.
like pretty cool. I'm having fun with it.
Yeah, I really like the ones that the Engineering for Kids came up with, but I know that some of that stuff's proprietary, so I can't really talk about it. But I think that they came up with some creative solutions, and the kids used a couple of really cool tools that did have like minimal programming when it came to them like learning how to do directional. And I
Yeah.
think that's pretty interesting. I know there's a lot of emulators out there for people that don't yet have the resources to get an actual kit, a drone kit for their
Yeah,
classrooms.
for sure.
I liked Ryder. I don't know if you know that brand, but like Ryder had all of these different emulators set
Mhm.
for a lot of different robotic systems, including some of the drones, as well as the controllers. I thought that was pretty good. That was a newer one. I know Spheros. I don't know if you know Spheros.
Oh
I
yeah.
just did one of their continuing education things this past month, and they have now like an interface digital display system that looked pretty cool, and their charging stations were pretty neat. So if you want to keep talking shop, I love this stuff. Like
Yeah, it's
it's
great. There's so much
yeah,
stuff
it's
out there.
fun. But I have to say that the fact that you've gone forward with your own curriculum is so inspiring, and that's not something all people are given the opportunity to do. So I say keep going for it. Like I
Yeah.
think that when I went back abroad and found out that like in China, for example, drones are only like you can't teach drones if you're a foreigner. Like there's different regulations on it. So like
Mhm.
it's you had private contractors that had to come into the school to teach that as like an elective, but it's
Yeah.
just, it's a different mindset, because it's like they developed the DJI systems, and the last couple of years when there's been regulations specifically on that brand, I just reached directly back out to say, hey, when are you guys going to change this so that you can come back into the market space? Like,
Yeah, right.
I understand that like technology needs to keep going forward, but it's also making sure those conversations happen and people aren't afraid to just like have those conversations,
That's right.
because it's
That's right.
it's a lot of really really important stuff that gets done. And if you don't have that conversation, then you don't know. And the DJI rep that I talked to, she didn't know. And I would much rather find out it's okay to say I don't know than
That's
to
right.
not have that
That's right.
conversation to
And
begin with.
yeah, and we'll inspire the kids of the future to do that stuff here, right? Like locally here, there's some great. We need that technology here as well. We need to be educating kids, students to be the next generation of the innovators that can do that stuff here, right? Not just using it, but creating it.
Yeah,
Um,
I can tell you what I would create that's been like wrapping around my head this entire summer is it's been 120 degrees in Phoenix.
yeah,
I
all
want
right.
to see ice drones. Like I want to see them made out of ice, and I want to see them where they can just melt components and all, like if need be. Like I think that's probably
Ice
the,
drones.
yeah, I see that as
How
like a
in
potential. Yeah,
how
I
could you
know,
make an
right?
ice drone?
I mean, if you could make an ice cube tray, but you change that it's not just the water that's freezing, you use a different composite. Like today, they're launching the Europa Clipper. They're going off to an icy moon around Jupiter. So, like,
Yeah,
I mean, you really, there's a lot you can do. Like, it's pretty
interesting.
cool. But if you think like cryogenics and where circuits function best at low temperatures, like I think it's very possible. And I think that
Wow.
the other really cool thing that I'm going to share with you that I met was someone this past year who was from Nepal, and he had actually out of New Jersey. He was here in Arizona. It was just totally random, but I think that using a fungal network, like there's different networks, right, that are coming up to how to get computers to work more efficiently. And I think a fungal network base would be faster if you
Hmm.
use that model. And using that in the ocean would be ideal. But anyway, so he was working on a project that lost funding to create a wireless system in the water. So between those two things, I think, there's a lot of things that
There's
are
a lot.
problems to be solved. And I am confident the next generation has more tools to solve them. And I really appreciate what you've done to bring that skill set across to so many states at this point.
Oh,
So
thank you.
I'm cheering for you. Keep going.
Well, thank you. And you've just left us on a very positive note. So you have optimistic views of the future and the next generation to solve some of these heady problems. Well, listen, Elizabeth, this has been great. I've enjoyed this. You've thrown a lot at us. We're going to parse it all out. We're going to link to some of these things in the show notes. Everybody, Elizabeth Allen, so good to see you. Thank you
Good
so
to see you as
much.
well. Take
All
care.
right.
Bye.
Bye bye.